Welcome to Democratic Television, a program of the Santa Clara County Democratic Party that brings insights, perspectives, and attitudes of our always thoughtful Democratic guests. Today our guest is Kyra Kazantzig, the supervising attorney, I think you have a different title than that, of the Law Foundation of Santa Clara County. Okay, now why don't you tell us what your title is?
Oh, it's directing attorney. And thanks so much for having me here today.
Well, we have a lot to talk about. I know there's bad things out there, and that's why your organization and you exist. And I want to cover all that. But first, let's talk about you. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? What were your hobbies?
I am from Tucson, Arizona. I grew up in the high desert out in kind of horsey/suburban country. And I went to undergrad there as well at the University of Arizona. And then I decided to have a change of weather, and so I headed to Ann Arbor, Michigan for law school.
Very good. So growing up in the early years, the formative years, did you think, I want to become an attorney? That's my number one goal?
That didn't come until high school, but it was a pretty early plan. I'm really my mother's daughter. My mom was a homemaker, and she also spent quite a bit of time as a community activist. Oh. She was the president of the League of Women Voters in Arizona, and she fought, unfortunately unsuccessfully, for the Equal Rights Amendment. She was a campaign manager and a local volunteer and on quite a few commissions and other kind of community activist bodies. And she got me going pretty early, probably around the same age as my own child, around five years old, doing, garbage pickup days, visiting elders in nursing homes, working at the League of Women Voters office, and I started pretty early doing community work.
Well, your home state certainly has a history of producing folks that I can see why your mom would want to get out and try to negate.
Yes. We did spend some time. My mom took me to the Arizona State Legislature, which was extremely eye-opening. Especially in the 70s. I guess this was, now I'm dating myself, but I think she took me up there around 1976, and I wore my Equal Rights Amendment bumper stickers on my clothing, and she had it posted up in our laundry room, making, I think, some type of statement about either laundry or women's rights. And so I have had, yes, quite a bit of interaction as a child, and then actually when I was in college with the Arizona State Legislature.
Well, good for you, and good for all the progressive Arizonans that are out there.
There are some, indeed.
There must be some.
Yes.
So what was your major in college? What did you study?
I had a major that grew out of indecisiveness. I had, I think, something like 3 minors. So Arizona let me graduate with, I think it was a general studies major with an emphasis on legal studies and creative writing. But I also studied political science and a couple of other things, and then I actually managed to graduate in 4 years, even with multiple degrees.
Oh, that's great. You didn't take the scenic route.
I did not take the scenic route. I wanted to get out because I had by then decided to go to law school, and so I was, taking classes that were interesting to me, but also trying to graduate so that I could make my way to Michigan.
So at some point you met this guy and said, I guess yes, or he said yes.
Oh, we're jumping to marriage.
Yeah, sure.
or the guy who offered me my first job. I did. They're two different people.
Oh.
Yes, I'm married. My husband's name is Eric, and I have a little girl, Cassia, 5 years old. And I'm a little late to motherhood. I spent many years working at my current job at the Law Foundation of Silicon Valley, and then I became a mom at age 39.
Oh, that's great. Let's back up a little bit. What got you to the Law Foundation in San Jose, California?
Yeah. So except for a brief foray as a troublemaker in high school, I pretty much kept on the path of community activism and community leadership. I was a student government kid, and when I went to University of Arizona, I worked in student government, and I advocated for student issues before the state legislature, and I worked for fundraising for homeless providers, and I at some point was in charge of a mile I don't know if you remember Hands Across America.
Oh, sure.
I was in charge of a mile in the Phoenix desert, and it was about 113 degrees out there. But we persisted and we managed to hold hands. So that was a big success. And then I went to law school, and I actually almost quit. I was pretty disillusioned by law school. Unfortunately, we kind of jumped right from we all wanted to do justice and save the world to we all wanted a job. And I still wanted to talk about the other thing. So I was close to leaving. And I decided one summer, instead of taking, a prestigious internship at some big law firm paying a lot of money, which actually I can't say was really offered to me, but instead of doing that, I was looking in the career books for something to do that summer, and my thought was, well, I'll probably take a class of some sort so that I can learn some skill other than teaching English in the Peace Corps, because that was my idea at that point. I was going to quit law school and go into the Peace Corps. And I opened the job book, and there was kind of a last-minute insert from some very busy lawyers who hadn't had time to publish their announcement for a summer internship. And it was at the National Abortion Rights Action League in D.C. And I thought, wow, the women's rights stuff, this runs thick in my blood. I'll give a call and see what happens. So I gave a call, and they gave me a phone interview, and they said, please come work for us this summer. We can't really pay you, essentially, but, it will be fun. So that's what I did. And that job, I was there at a very critical juncture in the choice movement, where the Supreme Court was considering the Webster case, and it was considering overturning Roe. And I was working with some of the most amazing lawyers who were working on this issue at that time, analyzing Supreme Court decisions and writing Supreme Court briefs. And it was such a compelling summer. I even stayed there for another semester. I convinced the school to let me stay for credit. And I stayed on, and I even, right after law school, came back again and took a fellowship job. And I remember I would work, 14-hour days, and I would never even look at my watch. I'm not sure how I knew it was 14 hours, but so I suppose I probably looked at my watch at least once or twice. But I generally didn't. I didn't have a desk. I worked on the floor sometimes. I had to borrow a computer, but I was very impressed with what I could do with my law degree, and so I decided not to quit. And then that's kind of how I managed to finish law school, by finding this amazing job.
Wow, that's really a lot of stuff, a lot of motivation and inspiration, and I can see how that carried on from walking door to door with your mom and the higher elevations of Arizona.
Yes. Yeah, it certainly did. And after my NARAL experience, I really valued that experience, and it was at a kind of very high policy level type work. But I decided I wanted to work with kind of actual humans on the ground, helping people with their individual problems. And so my main goal after law school, I had a stint as a judge's clerk for a year, and that year gave me some time to think about what I really wanted to do, and I really decided I wanted to just help. And so I wasn't looking for any particular kind of job, but I knew it needed to be in the public interest, and I needed to help people who were in need. And so I had and I didn't really need to make any money either. I decided, my law school loans could kind of wait, and I would just get a job that made me feel like that other job made me feel, like I was really helping and making a difference.
Yeah, it sounded so consuming and so motivational, and this is great, and law school was worth it.
Yeah, it was like discovering a calling and really having no choice but to follow it.
So you're at the Law Foundation now. Tell us what that process was like. How did you get there? Did you think this is the perfect job for me, or am I skipping ahead of 3 things that I should be asking you about?
No, I moved out to California with a boyfriend who's no longer in California, and I was looking for a job. This was 1991. Ooh, I almost made myself 10 years older. It was 1991, And this was like a depression for lawyers all across the country, and people were being laid off here and there. And a lot of my law firm friends were in pretty bad shape, getting laid off and looking for work. So it took me about 5 months to find a job. And in the meantime, I was just volunteering here and there, trying to provide free legal services, for other organizations while I was looking for paid employment. And the first job offer I got was from the Law Foundation. It was at Mental Health Advocacy Project, which is one of the 5 free legal services programs. And I got hired and started in 1992, and I've been there ever since.
Oh, wow.
So I'm there 18 years now.
That sounds great. We have a few minutes left in this segment. Could you tell me a little bit more about the Law Foundation? You say there's 5 different aspects to it.
Yeah, I would love to. The Law Foundation is a nonprofit, and it's the largest legal service provider, free legal service provider in Santa Clara County, although we also do now some work in San Mateo County as well. And we run 5 different legal service programs: Legal Advocates for Children and Youth, Health Legal Services, Fair Housing Law Project, Public Interest Law Firm, and Mental Health Advocacy Project. And all of those services provide a different array of legal services and sometimes social work services to different populations in mostly Santa Clara County.
Is the Law Foundation a unique concept? Are there law foundations throughout the country or other parts of California, or both?
Well, actually, that really speaks to the history of the Law Foundation and some other legal services entities across the country, in that some bar associations, mostly in the 70s, decided to form bar foundations, and some morphed into fundraising entities and some morphed into legal services entities. And so originally we were formed, our old name used to be the Santa Clara County Bar Association Law Foundation. It was a big mouthful. And we had that name for quite some time. And we were housed at the Bar Association. The Bar Association Board of Trustees and the president founded the Law Foundation. They were kind of radicals at that point. These are people who are now judges and sometimes appeals court judges, and they're very considered very wise elders in our community. And I hope none of them are watching; they're not that old, but they really were pretty radical and had quite a bit of foresight to form the Law Foundation in those days.
Great. We're going to take a little break right now. When we come back, we'll talk more about the Law Foundation and some of the projects you're involved with.
Perfect.
I'm Congresswoman Anna Eshoo, and I'm really pleased to say a few words to you today. One of the most often asked questions of me is, how did you get involved in this? It was 1960, I was a high school student, had to be 21 to vote, but you could organize. And so 783 students later, and many, many, many weeks of organizing, election night, I saw John F. Kennedy become President of the United States. Now, what's the relevancy today? You can do the same thing. Based on your passions, bring them to us, to the Democratic Party. If you care about the environment and preserving it, come to us, because we care about that. If you want quality education for all children, that's what we care about. If you want a health care system that delivers for everyone, come to us. Call area code 408-445-9500. You have a place for us, and together we can remake America into the kind of place that every citizen is proud of and deserving of.
That's one of the things my mom She definitely won't watch though. So hopefully I didn't say homemaker, but.
Welcome back to Democratic Television, and we're having a fascinating discussion about the Law Foundation. You said there's 5 different branches. Which is your favorite?
I love all my children equally, but I do have a special fondness for the 2 programs that I run.
Yes.
Public Interest Law Firm and Fair Housing Law Project. And our Public Interest Law Firm, which is the oldest project, it was the project that existed at the formation of the Law Foundation, is our impact and advocacy group. And so in that context, we represent groups of people who are disadvantaged to protect their rights. And it might be in a litigation matter, but it also could be in an advocacy or policy context. And then the other group that I manage is Fair Housing Law Project. And this is a group of attorneys and advocates who help people who are victims of housing discrimination. And so these attorneys, they go out in the community, they educate landlords and tenants and community service providers about the fair housing laws to try to prevent housing discrimination. And then if housing discrimination occurs, then we can help get redress for those folks. And it might be through advocacy, so picking up the phone, talking to the landlord, or it could be, if necessary, through litigation.
I met you working on predatory lending issues and trying to get some enforcement abilities here in Santa Clara County. So could you describe a little bit the predatory lending effort?
Yes. So the Law Foundation, both Public Interest Law Firm and Fair Housing Law Project, actually work together with a predatory mortgage lending practice. And we actually started seeing problems with mortgage loans as early as 2001, 2002.
That long ago.
Yeah, and we really kind of jumped to the work. And Sherston Arusha at Fair Housing Law Project at the time really had quite a bit of foresight in setting up a predatory mortgage lending practice. So I want to say we hired 2 or 3 attorneys and a legal assistant between 2003 and 2005, and had developed that by 2005, 2006, a very robust, very high volume practice in the area of predatory mortgage lending. And what that means is that we were helping people who had really bad mortgage loans. And they were so bad that they were illegal. And these are loans that sometimes folks couldn't afford in the first place, so they couldn't afford the payments. Oftentimes, in almost all the cases we saw, it involved fraud, and which meant that mortgage brokers or lenders were making promises that ended up not being true about mortgage loans. And one pattern we saw repeatedly was folks being sold a bill of goods on a mortgage loan or a refinance in Spanish, and then all the documents would come in English, and everything that was written in English was different from what was promised in Spanish. And so people were really being targeted, specifically targeted, and then taken advantage of because they didn't speak English as well. And so we brought dozens and dozens of these cases, and until 2007, 2008, we were able to get some pretty amazing results for people saving their homes, having their loans amount reduced, having their payments reduced, because they were, many people had these interest-only loans, loans that had interest rate that changed after even a year. Sometimes even these days we see interest rates that change after 5 or 7 years, but these teaser rates were even only for a year. But then the people who are buying the loan or getting the loan for sometimes their very first home had no idea what the interest rate was going to be, and therefore what the payment was going to be only a year later. And usually it was quite shocking in terms of the increase.
And I'm sure tragic, just destroying families with those great expenses they were no longer able to meet.
Yes. Well, yes, and also elders. We have part of our practice is helping elders who've also been ripped off by these mortgage scams. Sometimes it's with reverse mortgages, and sometimes they're packaged with annuities, which is never a good idea. And sometimes, they were trying to buy insurance, but instead they were sold a refinance or a reverse mortgage that they really didn't need and wasn't a good deal, they're very expensive loans. So we've seen seniors losing their homes, we've seen families losing their homes, and then having to move in really crowded living quarters. We've had folks have to move to garages or move in double, triple families in one home because they've lost everything because of these rip-off scams. The thing that's really difficult right now is that because of the worldwide financial crisis, many of these mortgage brokers went bust, or just because many of them were simply crooks, they just disappeared. And so it's actually quite hard for us these days to get a really good remedy for people in these matters. Our caseload is quite a bit smaller now, but it's not because people aren't being foreclosed against, it's because there's really very little remedy any longer. And it's quite more tragic now in 2010 than it was in the middle of our foray into predatory lending in 2005, 2006, where we really could save people's homes. Now it's really, really hard to save anyone's home.
Nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Another big issue that you're taking up, and I think will hopefully get a lot of community support, is the whole question of predatory payday lending.
Yes.
What is that? I understand people get cash their checks and can get some cash up front, and tell us about that problem.
Well, so thank you for asking about that. This is a very recent project for us, and this is coming out of our public interest law firm program. We wrote a study on behalf of the Community Foundation to explain the status of payday lending in California. And this was a relatively new issue for us. It's related in a lot of ways to kind of the consumer work that we do and the predatory mortgage lending work we do, but it does have its own kind of unique facets. And the Community Foundation, I think, thought that since we hadn't had a lot of work in that area, that we'd be a good, unbiased group to do a study for them. We issued the report, and what we really found in the report that is, and this is really boiling the report down quite a bit, is that one, payday lending is bad for communities. It's particularly bad for vulnerable communities. It strips assets to the tune of $450 billion a year from California communities and families. It's designed to be expensive. It's also designed to target people who are low income and to target people who are vulnerable and in vulnerable communities like ethnic minorities and African American communities.
It seems to be a phenomena that has just sprung up, at least where there's this pervasive number of loan operations.
This is true. There's been tremendous growth in the payday lending industry in California, and that stems from the fact that California's usury laws, it wasn't clear until 1997 whether the usury laws prohibited payday lending. And payday lending, just so you know the essential nuts and bolts of it, is I go in, I have a checking account, and I say, I'll write you a check for $300. That's the maximum. So it's a pretty small loan. But for these folks, it's a lot of money. I'll write a check for $300. You give me $255. So I'm paying $45 for that loan. And then I will, either you can cash my check in 2 weeks, or I will come back with cash in 2 weeks. And so that loan, just the one loan, is expensive. It's $45 for a $300 loan. But really what happens, and what happens so many times to California families, is that they can't pay it back. And so they get another loan. And on average, payday borrowers borrow 10 loans a year. And that's $450 for the same $300. This interest rate, $45 doesn't seem like a lot in some respects, but it really adds up when people get into this debt trap. And they keep paying and paying and paying for the same little amount of money. Really what's predatory about these loans, in addition to the predatory location and marketing and kind of over-concentration of payday lenders in certain neighborhoods, is the short term of the loan combined with the giant interest rates. And this is 459% APR. And folks think that credit cards have a high APR, 18%.
Right.
19%. Like if I have a credit card like that, I want to get rid of it. I want to get in the mail a new one that says 9%. This is 459% compared to 18%.
And it sounds like, as you're saying, it's a slippery slope. Someone goes in, writes a check, gets the $255 up front, pays, maybe keeps the lights on as a result of that, and is thinking, well, I'll be able to carry it, take care of it on my next paycheck, and the slippery slope has begun.
Yes, and the thing that makes this problem difficult to solve for some people is that they're experiencing chronic shortages in their income. And so, also in some low-income communities, the Brookings Institute has found that, everything's expensive. Food's expensive. All utilities are expensive. Housing's expensive. It's unusually expensive in some low-income communities to just go buy an orange. And you combine a person's low-wage income with the expense of all the different services in his or her community, you basically end up with this chronic shortage. And so a payday loan isn't solving that problem. It never will, and it just makes it worse.
Got it. We have about a minute left. How are you going to solve the problem? What are the tools that we need in our community?
Our report was looking at, in a nutshell again, 3 different, and we can find the report on our website and also on the Community Foundation's website, by the way. But if anyone wants to read all the pages, it's good bedtime reading. It kind of can help you sleep a little bit. We found that a statewide rate cap is really ultimately the best solution for this problem. We're looking and we're going to ask the state legislature to do a 36% rate cap like some other states have done. That would be the minimum that we would want to see in terms of controlling it at the state level. We can ask cities to make zoning ordinances that could limit the number of payday lenders there are and where they locate.
So there are things that we can do.
Yes.
We have just seconds left.
Yes.
If people want to get hold of you, what would you suggest?
There's all kinds of contact numbers and email addresses on our website. It's www.lawfoundation.org.
It's that simple.
It's that simple, yes.
Great.
And you can find me, and you can find all our other great staff members, and you can find our email addresses or our phone numbers.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Democratic Television. Give us a call at 408-445-9500 or visit our website, www.sccdp.org. Help make a difference.
Hello, I'm Senator Ellen Corbett. I'm proud to be a Democrat. I've been a Democrat all my life. The reason that I'm proud to be a Democrat is I believe the Democratic Party is the party that cares about the environment, who cares about the future for our children, who will fight to make sure we have the best education for our children, and who fights for civil rights and is the party that is the party of inclusion. If you'd like to get more involved with the Democratic Party, please call us at 408-445-9500.